Welcome back to Soul Ramble Mode. So, in my most recent live stream, I think it was, a couple of you guys brought up a very good and valid point, and that we have a couple of regions in regards to the region design in modern Pokemon, right? And this is something I'm probably gonna bring up briefly in my upcoming video. I guess if anybody's watching this, I'll give you a little teaser for it. It's literally just my fears, or why I'm nervous per se about Pokemon Winds and Waves. And one of those aspects is going to be the region design. And we'll talk, about that when we get there, but we're going to talk about it like in depth here, like focus more on the topic, which is why I wanted to make it a quick Soul Ramble mode, because I felt like this is a nice little chit chat that, we could just be cool about, you know what I'm saying? I don't think this needs like a crazy deep dive or anything like that. And I feel like I couldn't do a full video like that justice. So I just figured, hey, let's just chit chat about some things that have been on my mind in regards to this topic, right? Now, before we get to that, I need a couple of favors for you guys. Namely, first off, dropping a like and a comment, maybe subscribing if you're feeling this kind of thing. And if you could help, hype the video. Doing all of that stuff helps the channel immensely and motivates me to continue going with this channel, because I do generally have fun talking about Pokemon, but things have been a little bit on the quiet end lately, and every year that this happens, it just gets kind of harder and harder to make content sometimes, so I want to make sure that you guys are still enjoying the content. And again, don't worry, the heavier scripted and edited videos aren't going anywhere for the foreseeable future. It's just for now while we're in this downtime for Pokemon Winds and Waves. So if you guys could do me that favor, it would be so amazing, and I would appreciate it immensely. I'll make sure to give back to you guys proper, right? But the other thing is that the reason that you guys are probably getting this video late, and why you're going to see the video that I'm talking about likely tomorrow, is because I did get contacted by a sponsor opportunity. So if you guys could help me out and support that video that's going to drop tomorrow, it would mean the world to me. Okay, so if you guys could do that, I would appreciate that so much. Okay, all right, now all of that's out of the way, let's go ahead and focus in on the topic at hand today, right? During my most recent live stream, a lot of you guys were talking about how region designs have just not been it lately. And we say lately, I feel like most people can probably agree that the region design has kind of felt short since like Generation 8, which in reality, it seems like it hasn't been that long because it's technically only 2 generations ago, but we've had that generation for almost a decade. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, I don't think it's all that crazy to believe something like that, right? And I wholeheartedly agree. Like, even though there were some neat areas and designs within Generation 8, I will say that, having the wild area be the place that we spend the most time in, it kind of muddies that, because, in all honesty, I don't think I could name you a single city from Generation 8, right? I can't think of any. Maybe it's simply been too long, I don't know. The only cities that stand out to me were the last one that contained the 8th gym, and the little, like, what was that, the 6th gym or something like that, the one with like all the mushrooms, like the one that you would go into straight out of the forest. And that was probably one of the most beautiful cities within the game, and it felt really sad that it was so small and just so insignificant. Like, there was really nothing there, like not even like a handful of NPCs, like maybe like 5 or something. And it was like, so I don't know, maybe I'm remembering it wrong. I'm sure Future Soul will post up a little thing or something saying something about it. Maybe I'm a dunce, maybe I'm getting it wrong, but to my memory, I remember thinking like, wow, this is a pretty little spot, and then you were in and out of there and you never looked back. And it really sucks, because I don't know, maybe I'm imagining it too hard, but I feel like we had a lot more reason back in the day to, stick around in a lot of these towns for a lot longer. You know what I'm saying? Like, we would get a lot of interesting, like, landmarks, generally speaking. We would have some lore depth and stuff like that. I remember specifically in Generation 4 when we went to the hometown of Cynthia's grandmother. That was in Celestic Town, and that was like after a hard trek. I don't want to say hard trek, but it was definitely like you were fighting trainers after trainers, going through fog, and trainers popping up out of the ground. I can visualize it. Maybe it's because I played Generation 4 so much, but getting to Celestic Town in of itself was a really interesting journey. And then when you finally get there, hindsight, it is a really small town, but it stuck with you because you know, you meet Cynthia's grandmother, and that was kind of a trip. Cynthia's there too at some point. I think it was after the entire event there, but you went to the little, like, not shrine, but the monument that was like underground, and you saw the little tapestry, or like the designs on the walls and stuff like that, the drawings, the cave wall drawings, right? And you got little bits of lore and stuff like that on the legendaries. I think it contained information depending on which game you were playing. Obviously Dialga or Palkia, and I think the Lake Trio, right? And you know, that sticks with me. It's just like, wow, like I'm really glad I came here. You know, the vibes are right. It was really, really chill, and it made a lasting impression. And I feel like even after like 5th generation, even 6th generation, a lot of the towns didn't go out of the way to do that nearly as much. But again, maybe it's because I was a lot more impressionable as a kid. You could chalk it up to that, but I just feel like there's a certain energy that's missing when visiting new towns in more recent generations, right? Even in like Generation 7, I mean, the islands were neat, they were pretty, and I liked that they took a very different direction. And you know, the cities were cool. I can't. I think one of the problems with 7th gen is that I can't remember how to pronounce any of those towns. And I feel like that situation got worse, not in Generation 8, but in Generation 9 specifically, right? And so, you know, that's one of the other major points that I have listed here, is that, you know, towns have been significantly nerfed. It's that, you know, a lot of them are just kind of like, they feel, I know that there's definitely some, you know, depth to them to an extent, but it feels like we don't really get as much opportunity to explore that depth because we're not as incentivized to, right? And I feel like in Generation 9 specifically, that shows in full force. Because, you know, again, all the townspeople are just kind of out and about. None of them have anything interesting to say. It's very, very few of them that actually have something worth like talking to anything about or trading with or whatever, if they have an item to give you maybe. But, you know, we're lacking that depth. You know, you're not going to a town and, you know, finding out about the history of some Pokemon and stuff like that every now and again, right? Again, you know, Generation 8, very hit or miss with a lot of that. Generation 8 did try to do that, and I can appreciate that. But Generation 9 is where it's starting to scare me, right? Because Generation 9 felt like it had none of that at all and didn't put in the effort to do anything interesting with its towns. Because, you know, in a way, it knew that we weren't going to be there for long enough to justify putting in much effort to take us around town very much, right? Obviously, there were a couple of interesting little things and tidbits and landmarks here and there, but for the most part, you know, you're pretty much in and out of those towns and cities like nobody's business because, you know, it's an open world game. So, you know, hopping into the first town where you get the first gym badge against the grass gym leader, you know, it had a little semblance of something. You know, I could appreciate the flowery and like garden like design of it, the garden aesthetic of going through like the little maze and stuff like that, the little hedge maze. That was cool. It was really fun. I just wish that there was a little more something special to it. It feels like, you know, on more recent playthroughs, I played through that game like what, 3-4 times at this point. I literally can't even remember what's in there, you know what I'm saying, because it's barely significant. I'm pretty sure on my last 2 playthroughs I didn't even bother doing that maze, right? And then after that, for the most part, you know, the towns, they didn't have, you know, anywhere to go inside. And that's another major thing, right? Because we couldn't go inside of all of these buildings and stuff like that, it was just, we were always greeted by menus. So there was no, you know, interesting NPCs that might have been hanging out in the store or buying some clothes that might have had something interesting to say about what, you know, that store or that, you know, shop might have been selling. So you're just kind of going in and out, you know, going through the menus or whatever, going through the motions to get whatever you might have, you know, wanted to get that was new within that town. Because it's a brand new town, you would get the new clothing items, you would get the new little stuff for your recipe, you know, you get ingredients and stuff for your recipes, your sandwich recipes, and then you were pretty much in and out. And I feel like because of that, it was just lacking so much more depth than usual. Because even in Generation 8, you know, we still were able to go inside of places. We were able to see restaurants and people and, you know, unique designs and stuff like that. I think I'm starting to give Generation 8 a little bit more credit now in this regard. And I think the primary thing here is that Generation 8 has, or sorry, Generation 9 has scared me for Generation 10, right? And it's because the towns have been significantly nerfed that I'm really scared for the future, because I don't want another situation in which we're in and out of these towns. I have no incentive to talk to a lot of these NPCs that may or may not have something. I could easily waste all my time just talking to NPCs if they even offer that as an option. Most of them are just kind of walking around, and they act like souls. Like you could see their thoughts, but that's kind of it, right? I don't know if I want that again. That was really sad, and it felt kind of disconnected from what we were used to. So, I just really hope that they give towns in the future just a little bit more love. Again, this doesn't just apply to Pokemon Winds and Waves, although that is the next game in the series, the next one in line. I'm really hoping that they give us, some more meat when it comes to these towns, and what they have to offer, what kind of NPCs are lurking there, what kind of stories we might be able to learn from these places just based on their design alone. Because I feel like in Generation 9 we absolutely did not get that, because they were like, yeah, they're not going to bother sticking around here. Don't even bother making anything about these towns remotely interesting. And that was really, really, really sad. And I hope we avoid that mentality going into the next major open world title, right? And, I just mentioned this, but the next thing that I have listed here is that hunting for special items has been significantly more limited and boring, right? Because in previous titles, you would go in all these different places, there would be little, nooks and crannies that you would have to kind of find your way around, I don't want to say puzzles and stuff like that. Because here's the thing, right? If we're being completely honest, while it is for the best that HMs probably aren't a thing anymore, it did make for much more interesting overworld puzzles, right? And because of that, especially going back through Generation 1, you get something like Cut, for example, and then you go back to the first town and you remember, oh yeah, there's this little tree up here that leads to the Indigo Plateau. Let me cut this down, and there's an item there, and it could be something useful. Now that I have that, it's probably something I can use. And then you're using Cut everywhere, and you're finding all these little hidden items that you weren't able to get to before that you remember, because you're sitting there thinking like, okay, once I get the item that I need to get that, I can come back here. That was the perfect building mentality to incentivize you to come back to all of these towns back in the day. We don't have that incentive anymore, right? So, hunting for items and stuff like that, they kind of figured like, nobody's gonna bother going out of their way for like super, special items like that unless, it's really, really good. But even then, they would just kind of place them in kind of not unique spots, but just spots that are a little bit more out of the way. Like if you're just kind of jumping around aimlessly in pretty much any of the towns or cities in Scarlet and Violet, good chance you'll happen across a gold Pokeball that might have something actually useful, right? But that's not an interesting way to discover that. That's not really fun, in my opinion. That's not a really fun way to do that, right? I would love a little bit more of a hunt. Give me something, give me an interesting little hunt to do. Give me a little path to go on, some, Pokemon to fight. Make me go out of my way a little bit to, find something that I wouldn't have otherwise, right? Make me work for it a little bit so that I feel rewarded and I get something for my efforts. Because, again, it just didn't feel like the towns and cities had anything like that to incentivize more exploration half the time. And, obviously, down the line, we're much more in tune with the internet now. So most people will be like, oh yeah, you could just find this right here. Like all you gotta do is jump to this, and that's just like, that's it. Like, okay, cool. You're not making us work for it anymore. And that's a little, it's a little sad, right? So that's one thing that was a little upsetting. And then another thing that I have listed here, it is the last thing that I have listed here, is the fact that cave exploration has been weak in both aspects, in open zone and open world, right? Because I immediately think back to that first cave in Pokemon Legends Arceus that I can remember, where it's just like, the coloring is off or whatever. You can use Rock Smash, but most of it's just kind of empty. Like, yeah, maybe you'll find some neat Pokemon in there, but it's just so like barren and empty and boring. Like there's nothing in there. There's nothing to look at. No cave drawings, no unique pathways or anything, right? It's so easy to not get lost that it's a joke, right? And it's like that for pretty much all of the caves in that game, right? There's only one cave that I could think of that was remotely interesting. That's only because it had Zorua in there, the Hisuian Zorua. It was in the ice plains or whatever that area was called. But even then, like, it just kind of proved to be a little bit on the weaker side. It proved to be kind of uninteresting to explore. And I think, you know, us having so much freedom has limited that type of exploration, because they don't know how to stop us from just going around a rock, going around any form of obstacle, even though I feel like they could easily like make something interesting, right? I think to RPGs like Kingdom Hearts, for example, I think if we had more caves that operated, maybe not all of them and maybe not to this extent, but for example, you know, in Agrabah, I know a lot of, if any Kingdom Hearts fans are listening to this, they probably got triggered. But in Agrabah, you know, they have the Cave of Wonders, and, you know, it's just so filled to the brim with, like, you know, puzzles and interesting loot and things like that, you know? And I feel like if we had more cave designs to that degree, I think things would look and feel a lot more interesting, right? Because now, you know, you're incorporating all these little puzzle elements. You can add like little falling elements so that you can have one area lead to another, right? You can have your Rotom phone save you when you fall down a little hole and now you're in a completely different area, you know, have little ladders that lead to different places. I just feel like it was severely lacking stuff like that that could make cave exploration way more interesting. And obviously, that situation bled right into Scarlet and Violet because they were working with the exact same problem. Is that they just kind of scattered a bunch of random trainers everywhere. But again, we already have the situation in Scarlet and Violet in which we were barely incentivized to go out of our way to fight trainers. So it was kind of a breeze to just walk through the cave if we really wanted to, because we could see the end. Right? You could just breeze through. You could blitz past that cave in pretty much no time at all. And I can only think of a handful of caves, and most of them offer nothing outside of just, you know, a few random Pokemon here and there, right? And, you know, it really sucks that, you know, we lost the art of, you know, the puzzles and the more unique cave designs with weird little things that might foreshadow what's going to happen in the Prime story. Right? I feel like we're lacking that. On top of, you know, legendary Pokemon hunting in the traditional way that we had in prior generations, where, you know, you would stumble upon this cave like, oh yeah, there's some unique Pokemon in here. There's probably a lot of good items that I could get out of this. And then, like, you know, you get deeper and deeper and you're like, what's going on here? Like, what is this? And then you stumble upon a creature you hadn't seen before, you know, Mewtwo, right? It's stuff like that that I think really made for fun, deep exploration. And, you know, we don't have that. And I feel like maybe I'm tripping here, but I don't think Generation 8 had anything like that either. The only cave that I could think of in that region was the Crystal Cave that had like all the shiny diamonds and shiny rocks in there. And, you know, that was just kind of just a pathway to bead, because you never go back in there. You know, you never have a reason to. Once you've gone through that cave initially, there's nothing else in there, right? So, I don't know. I just think the general current region design is a little bit more on the sad side, and I fear for Pokemon's Winds and Waves in that way, because I don't think we're going to escape that problem now that we've entered the open world format, unless they have found a way to, you know, help blend, you know, the world design and region design of prior generations into the open world format. I feel like we're going to run into that exact same problem here, but who knows? There might not even be caves here. And again, I'd be glad to be wrong based on the fact that we could go underwater this time around. Sorry if you heard me hit my stand. That's crazy. There are possibilities that we could end up in some really cool like underwater caves, and we could find out about some really unique scenarios or maybe some foreshadowing and lore through those underwater caves and stuff like that. I really hope that turns out to be an important mechanic that we could take more advantage of to help world build a little bit and to make things and exploration just a little bit more fun and interesting. So regardless, that is currently where I am at with that. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you probably have a lot to say in regards to that, which is why I'm passing the mic over in your direction. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking, but down below. Are you on the familiar side with this, right? Are you on the same side about this? General region exploration and design has been kind of weak, especially in 9th generation, and you kind of fear for it going into 10th generation because it is also an open world game, and you think that maybe, hopefully, future generations could touch up on that a little bit to make the world feel a little bit more full? Or are you on the opposing side? Region design is just fine. We don't need stuff like that to be interesting or to incentivize us to explore, because we do that anyway. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm Gonzo. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
So can't handle us, so cool, baby, scandalous. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So cool, baby, watch it now. It's a